This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Duell of Red Direction. You are listening to Me First. It's interesting because if I say, hey, it's me first, or hey, I'm putting myself first, or hey, I'm doing this for me, all of those can be perceived two ways: is I'm selfish and I only care about myself, or who do you think you are? Because how can you be service-oriented if you are putting yourself first? And Ivana and I really dig into this. We look at the myth of the latter. When we put ourselves first, we are not disgracing, putting behind, or leaving behind anybody else. In fact, we're creating a stronger net. We're creating a stronger point of view. And when we know what we want, we can communicate that to others. If we allow other people to indicate and tell us and influence what we think, there's usually over time some sort of resentment or anger or frustration of not being heard. Well, it's because we didn't speak up to begin with. So I want you to think about that as you're listening to this conversation with me and Ivana. It's really bold. It is bold in a world where we think of service that equates to some level of martyrdom. And you will see the people who are successful have service because they know what they want, they know what they have to give, and they are able to communicate it to find out if somebody else wants what they have to give. So they're not assuming everybody wants what they have. They're not assuming everybody will be able to use what they have. They're clear with themselves. And I am going to introduce you briefly to Ivana before we jump into the conversation. Ivana Taylor is the publisher of DIYmarketers.com, a resource for entrepreneurs who want to do less marketing and make more money. In 2010, she ranked 21 out of 30,000 influential people on the internet. She is a book editor for Small Business Trends, a contributing author to Amex Open Forum, and has appeared on MSNBC. I have to tell you, she is high energy. I am high energy. Our conversation wanders a little bit. However, you will notice in that wandering, all of the concepts are coming together, and we weave thoughts and approaches from a spectrum of belief systems that will be interesting and thoughtful for you.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Duell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
We're talking about this concept of me first, me first, me first, me first. And there are two sides to this coin. And Ivana and I have just been talking, and I'm interrupting to share with you that we're going to keep talking about this, but let you guys in on the secret of what we're talking about today and why it's relevant. So we're talking about me first, me first, me first. And it could be that, but it could also be I am first, so I can lead. I am first, so I can provide, versus, ooh, me, it's me. I want to be first. It's my turn kind of thing. And there are two sides to this story. And we both have children, Ivana and I. And so we're talking about school, and we're talking about self-directedness, and we're talking about discipline. And finally, I was like, you know what? I better press record. So here we go. All right, Ivana, let's just pick up where we were just talking about. We were talking about parents worried about their children liking them.
I got to tell you a story because it was a defining moment for me. And I'm not sure if I was a mom yet or not. Honestly, I cannot remember, but I remember this circumstance. I'm in my car. I had just left my home and I was at a stoplight, and I am a ridiculous, and I hope this doesn't upset some people. I live in Ohio. It upsets some people, but I love NPR.
Oh, I like NPR too.
Great stories on there. And they had an expert that they were interviewing who was I'm not sure if she was like an animal expert of some sort, but I don't remember any of that. I just remember being at the red light and I'm listening, and the woman says, human beings are the only creatures on the planet who don't truly prepare their young to survive. And then she goes on and she says, every animal in the animal kingdom teaches their young to survive, right? Birds teach their young how to fly. They learn how to hunt. They learn how to do whatever it is that it takes to survive. And yet human parents don't really do that. We have a longer parenting cycle. We seem to, she didn't use the word coddle, but we try to protect our children. But a mother's job is to prepare her children for survival in the real world. I was transformed when I became a mother, whether that was a few months after that or whether I was a new mother, I can't recall. But what I do remember is instantly in that moment making the decision that I have an important job to do. And the job does not entail you liking me. And the job does not entail anything. My job is to create a functioning human being that contributes and that is the best version of himself, since I have a boy, is the best version of himself to be a contribution to society, whatever it is that he's meant to do in the world. Oftentimes that means doing and saying things that do not make me likable. And you know what? I do not care the least bit. And as I was telling you earlier, it has no effect. So this thing of will they like me for doing whatever it is that I do is completely irrelevant. Now, what's really interesting is my husband is way more concerned with whether my son likes him or not. Isn't that interesting? He's way more concerned about that. And guess what? I think I have the upper hand. Don't tell my husband I said that. There is love there and everything, but somehow I have that feeling, and I've actually asked Alexander, I'm like, do you think I care whether you like me or not? And he says, no, I really don't think you do. Does that make you like me more or less? He's like, no, mommy, I love you.
And I'm thinking about this because when it comes to schools and it comes to parents of my child's friends, and when it comes to what my values are in my house, there are big gaps on each side of those things. And so being able to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. This is what I believe. Here is what you must know by the time you're on your own. Let's take every chance we can to do that. Now that's exhausting, and it doesn't happen every single moment of every single day because we have different challenges at different ages from 5 to 17. I mean, we have those. So our challenges are different, but the consistency is really important, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Did you hear about that study talking about me first and leadership quality?
Oh, no. Yes. Okay.
Right. So the first thing I want to say is that you are showing leadership qualities, whether it's a child, because even in our work environment, there are oftentimes you see parent-child relationships going on.
Yes. In work. That's correct.
Who you're being is someone who's in control of the situation and showing leadership in that way. But have you heard about that study, Jess, the one that talked about, like in 1950 something, they asked people how important they felt they were. How important are you? Or something like that.
I have heard about that.
And then they did it again recently. So like the first time, that number was low. It was like 30% felt that they were an important person or something. But like they just did it recently, and that number is like 70 or 80. Like it's really high.
It's really, and these are young adults.
Young adults.
These are young adults in this study. I want to talk about that for a minute, because when we're talking about leadership at work and these concept of parent-child relationships at work, I know the biggest complaint of the business owners that I work with, they feel like they have to educate about life to their employees, that their employees come to them and they can get the job, they can say the right things, they can go through the hoops, they can do whatever they can. And then when they're in the job, they don't have the skills to keep that job. They either have a high turnover or high investment in trying to get these people to where they're going to contribute, and then they get bored or they decide they want to do something else. And average time we stay in a job today, especially for young adults, is a lot less than it was even 15 years ago when I was a young adult in a job. I kept my first job for 7 years. Right? People don't do that anymore. And so it's very interesting to see some of these changes and these dynamics. So we're talking about me first in what I would consider the most common way that we see in our society today, and in my opinion, a negative way. I have a couple of books with me because this is what I do. I got books. The Go-Giver. Have you read this, Ivana?
Don't you just love, isn't that Bob Berg?
Bob Berg. Love Bob Berg. Everything he says. This book is all about service. It's all about, here are the things you do to notice people. Here are the things you do to show people you care. Here are the things that you do that ultimately will have the world come back to you, right? This concept of this boomerang, whatever you put out, you get. And I love. Now, in a world today where we're talking about this negativity, we're talking about these things of how self-important we are today. When this comes in, we end up in dysfunctional relationships. The people who are serving, they're serving with expectation. And there's a big difference between serving and having this concept of the me first. So what about me? This dynamic, it drives me crazy, Ivana. And that's the one that I see that I don't like. I'm like, well, if you're service oriented, why do you care if you get anything back? If you're service oriented, isn't the purpose to make sure you've solved that person's problem regardless that they acknowledge you or not?
Well, as you know, one of the things I'm always talking about, of course, in the realm of marketing, is the marketing is about who you're being and not what you're doing.
Yes.
So in this matter of being, who are you being in every circumstance? So even if what you're doing is providing service, if who you're being is, am I allowed to say? I don't even think I'm allowed to say this anymore, but it just popped up.
Come on, do it.
The Indian giver thing. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Not giving because you're being of service, or as I like to say, I have a distinction. I have a distinction between service and contribution.
I love that clarification. Yes. And that's where I think people are missing out and we get bad dysfunction because somebody like Bob Berg is giving us this roadmap, but we don't have the skills to use it because we don't know how to contribute.
I don't think people understand what contribution is.
Well, tell us in your words, what is contribution?
There are transactions. You go to the store, you give them some money, they give you toothpaste. That's a transaction. I give you money, you give me something. Then there's service. I give you money, and you do something that I don't know how to do or that I don't want to do. That's still kind of a transaction. You give me money, I do this thing. So I had hired a friend of mine to help me with some social media. I can do social media, but I've had a bunch of things going on and I just needed another body to help me do the whole thing. Here was the service I paid for. Start a Twitter account, start a Facebook account, a G Plus account, fill it up with some stuff, and so on and so forth. That was what I paid for. That was the scope of the project. That was the service. About a week or so into this project, she gives me a call and she says, you know what, I did all these things that you asked for, but you're missing out on Pinterest. I went out and I opened you a Pinterest account as well, and I stocked it with stuff. Pinterest drives traffic. That is contribution.
Yes.
I know what you want. I know what the goal is. I'm not only going to do what you asked me to do, because in this case, I didn't have time to do it, but I'm going to give you something else that's going to fulfill on your objective. That's contribution.
Even though a single person or a team may have a goal, until it goes out into the world and until the rest of the team joins in to be able to find out how is this going to work, we don't know what holes there are. And the contribution is filling the holes, isn't it?
It is. If you go into the world being a contribution, but let's talk about what me first has to do with anything.
Yes, I would like that.
As someone who works with teams, as I know you
Both
do,
of us, yeah.
do, right? There is a team model out there called the Drexler-Sibbitt model. It's a 7-phase model. The first thing that it starts with, which I think speaks exactly to your topic, and I think a very healthy perspective of me first. The first node, like your team cannot be successful unless this first thing is addressed, and that is, why am I here? Why am I part of this team? And so it's really understanding, why are you part of this group? What does the group see in you as part of your contribution? It's kind of a little, sometimes they reflect at you like, oh, I really love that you have this awesome talent. You may not even have known that you have this talent.
Right. Yep.
You perceive that you have this talent.
Mm-hmm.
And another aspect of it, back to your leadership component of this conversation, is also knowing what you're there for, knowing your own self, what your talents are, and knowing what you bring to the party. What is your gift? What is the gift you bring to the party?
And also knowing that your own why. Somebody else might have said, you're going to be part of this team because I've decided it.
Yeah.
Or in the case of children, our families, whether we live with our parents or not, whether our kids live with us or not, whatever that dynamic is, it is what it is. Maybe why am I in this role? Why did I join this company? Was because my first and most priority is to get those bills paid and keep a roof over my family, have a place to go home and sleep every night. And you know what? That is an A-OK why. We don't have to have these big overarching passion-driven whys. Sometimes our why is providing for our family. Our why is providing for our community in a different way. And I don't want to overlook that in this concept of me first, because you bring up this great point about why. Why am I here? And sometimes it feels really big, and it doesn't have to be big.
It doesn't have to be. What a great example, because I think sometimes a lot of these conversations get really big and lofty. There's no need for that. You have to take care of what there is to take care of. I was at a lecture with this Buddhist nun about 25 years ago. We're sitting in this little tiny bookstore, and once again, don't remember what she said. I do remember that somebody asked the question, and she said, the question was, I don't know what God wants me to do. I want to do what God wants me to do. Constant question. Lots of people have that question. As you would expect, the Buddhist nun says, ready for the punchline, if there are dishes in the sink, God wants you to wash them.
And this comes down to our values, and maybe not even values. I think maybe it's more about priorities. It's our priorities and taking care of what we have and making it last. We're getting a little bit away from that in some sense because we are in a disposable society. It is easier to buy a new toaster than to fix the toaster we have. It is easier to have a pen that we throw away when it is empty than it is to have the refill pieces that we can get taken care of. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. It makes our lives faster and easier so we can focus on other priorities. But understanding that we have these priorities and we're consciously making the choice about what our priorities are really matters, because sometimes we think we get to make all these choices, and then what happens? These people are like, well, nothing ever goes my way. Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't know. I don't see it like that. Well, this bad thing happened to me. Well, I can never get a break. And you know what? Absolutely, you can. It's the way you're looking at the opportunity of what is in front of you.
It's a choice every single day. You can choose not to get like all heady on things, but people say to me, I'm like a little too excited about things. People are like, how come you can be like that excited about everything? And I'm like, what's the alternative? You want me to be like a grump about it? I could definitely do that. That's not nearly as much fun. And when you're thinking about the idea of me first and leadership, really it's all about, I see me first. It's almost, well, I'm going to do that old thing about the airplane, right? Like you have
Good. I was going to go there. Absolutely.
Go there?
Yeah, I was going to go there. Let's go. It's perfect time.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Okay, so Ivana alluded to and handed off to me, what's the first thing you hear about safety? After you put on your seatbelt and you know where the exits are, they talk about if there's a problem, something's going to fall out of the ceiling to help get you oxygen. And you put your own mask on first before you help anybody else next to you, including your children. We're going to go back to the NPR thing that you were talking about. Of course, the mama's going to take care of the problem and make sure she can take care of her babies. So why is it counterintuitive for a human to do? To us, it's like, what? It's counterintuitive. We should always put our children first. No. If I don't sleep, I have no energy, and I'm a really bad mom. If I don't sleep, I'm a really bad boss, and nobody's going to want to be around me, and we're going to have difficult relationships at work and miss deadlines. And I mean, there's all kinds of other stuff that comes up first. So if we started with me first, I'm gonna sleep.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna sleep, right? And now let's talk about it in business. This concept of me first with leadership and being excited all the time. Let's talk about self-trust. I think it's easier to put the responsibility of, do we like it? Do we not? Is somebody going to take care of me? I've got this support network. Just automatically hand off the responsibility. And that is anti me first in the sense of an active, involved, purposeful leader.
It is. And I can't believe that you're talking about trust, because I'm going to go back to my Drexler team model. Guess what the second note is? What am I doing here? Why am I here? Then that's absolutely second component of working together. Can I trust you? we don't talk about this so much anymore, but years ago we did talk about like unions. And one of the number one thing in organization and unions, that why do unions exist? Because they don't trust leadership. I used to work in a union organization, and I remember the whole union management meetings, and you could see the trust component so clearly. So people understood why they were there.
Yep.
I'm here to run this machine. The CFO is there to run the numbers. But when it came to working together, the prevailing conversation with the union at that time was, quite frankly, are you trying to screw me over? I'm going to make all these improvements. The organization's going to profit. And am I going to see any of that? That's a trust issue. From the management point of view is, well, can I trust you to make these efficiencies and not to slow down production to save your job? These prevailing conversations that happen that are unspoken.
They're usually the elephants in the room.
Exactly. And of course, we've all had examples of working in a really highly productive team where now that I'm telling you these things, you know, like, yeah, that's right. I did know what I was there. I served a very clear purpose. And yeah, I could totally trust my team that I could do my part and hand off the rest to the team members. That's an important component. And only then do you get into goals,
right,
and resources,
right,
and so on and so forth, which are other elements of this team performance model. But the foundation is, do you know why you're there? And the second most important part is the trust element. No doubt about it.
You know, the same issues are burdening companies today, and there's more transparency than there ever was before. And in a time where there is more service than production occurring, at least in the United States, we're going to call it that, in the United States, that there would be the same trust issues. Some of that may be learned. Some of that also is from experience, and some of that also is not from asking a question. People expect to be told everything. How can one person who's leading 1,000 or even 10 people get in your head and know exactly what you need to know when you need it? Got to open your mouth. Gotta open your mouth.
If you ever really think about it, the number one cause of conflict is undelivered communication.
Okay, now define that, because some people might not understand what undelivered communication is.
Like in the example I gave with the prevailing ideas, where, you know, let's say the union doesn't trust management to share profits, and management doesn't trust unions to do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, or like whatever. What would happen if they actually said that to each other and talked about it?
Oh my gosh. Talk about productive conflict. And that's the other thing. Me first doesn't mean I get my way all the time. Me first means I'm going to speak up, ask the questions, find out where the gaps are, and I might not be able to fix them, but at least I understand where it is, and somebody else can go, oh, there is a gap here. I see it too. Okay. And then we have another choice. Do we work on fixing it, or do we not?
Correct. And then what you're talking about in that case sounds like me first as personal responsibility.
Me first is a personal responsibility. It is my choice to sleep or not. It is my choice to eat the right food or not. It is my choice to be grumpy or excited or not, right? When I am excited about something, I am 100 complete, fully present. And the word that I get associated with is, in addition to excitement, is intense. And so when somebody looks at me and goes, man, you're intense, I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm all here. That's pretty cool. I'm striving for more of that.
All here.
Because I'm putting myself first. I'm saying, well, if this is going to take up my time, I'm not going to be distracted with anything else. I'm going to be right here. This is the time I'm spending. My choice. And I think we forget that we have a choice. Oh, this bad thing is happening to me. Oh, I'm going to put my children first. Oh, I'm so tired because I can't get everything done. Well, what if we could? What if we could say, you know what? I know everything seems important right now for me in my life, for me in my job, for me in my company. We're seeing the cliff and we're not sure if we're going to be able to stop before we get there. A lot of people, they want to go faster, which loses that sense of self. There's a lot we can't control anyway, but the little bit that we can control, can't we slow down? Can't we take a minute and say, wow, what if we just slowed down? Yeah, I see it coming and it's coming really fast. I got to go slow my brain down because there's something I'm missing. Goes back to the example of everybody knows why they're there, and your service example of where, oh, there was this additional thing that we can add, and it takes very little time and it has very big return to stop and find gaps. This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Duell of Red Direction. You are listening to Me First.
I work with a lot of small business owners on very practical marketing
Mm-hmm.
concepts. And I've noticed that, and I see this in my audience and I notice it with my clients, everyone is like, I'm going, it's almost like either, how do I say this? Let's do.
Yes.
Let's do email, let's do social, let's do all these things. And as if like, let's just run and do. And when you said take the time to think and slow down, I'm always telling people, slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Got to slow down. There's actually, like most things, there's only like this much. It's like the sharpen your saw thing.
Yes. Yes.
This much stuff in the overall scheme of things, but you've got to, how do I say this? Spend like 80% of your time crafting this thing so that once that part's done, you can go on to something else. And then everything else is so much easier because you worked on this little thing.
Yes. And when we are distracted and we get pulled in a whole bunch of different directions, that practical example right there, this little thing is so important. Dinner conversations at our house are always exciting because my husband, he's an architect, specifically a software application architect. His concept is really big into iteration. What can I do now? Am I doing it the best I can? And now that I'm doing it the best I can, what can I do next? And improve, little stair step, exactly like what you're talking about. And so every once in a while, I'm describing this big thing, and I've gotten in my own way, by the way, I've gotten in my own way of this, and I'm telling this story, and all of a sudden he goes, well, that's me. That's my interpretation of him. He's like, just stop already. Just stop already. You know what? Just go back there. And sure enough, sometimes there's that thing that you just get in your way and he can go, that's it. There's the point. That's the lever. Once that one piece is found, it's amazing because everything else changes and it falls into place. And I'm thinking about me first. We've talked a little bit about personal responsibility. We've talked about a little bit of accountability around it, if there's some blame or not. Is there this concept and counterintuitive of why would I help myself first? I want to put everybody else first. That's a human problem. Does it come down to right and wrong? Like black and white. I'm either doing this or this. It's an either or. This or this, this or this, this. And then we're going to go back to, will people like me? Will I still belong? Versus this, here comes this outcome and I have solved a problem. This and nobody else saw it, but we removed other obstacles because of the outcome. So when we're thinking about right and wrong, right? It's black or white. It's this or this or. It's either or.
I have untrained myself into this or that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this, people are going to think I'm crazy because I assure you, when I first heard of this concept, I thought it was nuts.
Okay.
I have trained myself to insert the word and.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for example, I can go on vacation or pay my bills. To do like a very fundamental.
Sure, let's do it. Like it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Common, very common thing that people are experiencing.
Very mundane, very common. I can, buy a new car or I can fix my roof. Vacation, pay a bills. I have to pay my bills. I want to go to Maui. We think it's a this or that. And I think that's very limited thinking. Agreed. Let's continue with, I have to pay my bills. There's bills to pay. And I want to go on vacation. That doesn't mean maybe if the vacation you were thinking of is a cruise or something expensive, then paying your bills and going on that particular vacation might take a little extra creative thinking on your part. However, if you go, I have to pay my bills and I want to go on vacation, and you sit there and go, well, what is it that I love about vacation? Is it time with my family? Is it being in the sun? Is it being unplugged? Or what is it about vacation that is the essence of what I'm after? Because it doesn't necessarily, you can get those things. If you think and instead of or, you might be able to uncover some ways to get those things and have these things happen together without having things drop off.
You're very articulate when you said, I have untrained myself to do this. I also have untrained myself to do this. I also seem to have forgotten what I did. And so having that is a very good practical example that we can start using right away and allows the opportunity for more thought, more options, more conversation with other people to get ideas that can then be filtered and used going
And
through the problem
magical
solving.
word. I took a comedy class a few months ago. Well, the improv rule is never disagree with anything that's happening. It's always and. You're always accepting whatever that other person is saying is the downright truth and then taking that forward. And how many times, so now that I've told you this, your brain's going to notice it. How many times do you say, I was doing, we could do X, Y, and Z, or but blah, blah, blah.
But and or are equal.
Are equal, right?
They are equal.
Oh, here's a great one in talking to other people. Wow, Jess, that's a great point. And I was thinking blah, blah, blah. So instead of saying, that's a great point, but, something else.
But is a negator.
Yeah, but is a negator and is like an expander.
Exactly. Open and closed. And that is such an important part of really everything when we're thinking about it is, and I say this occasionally, and other people say this, variations of this. When we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. We need to make sure that no to something else is something we can live with and will not be resentful of. Because this concept of me first and why, in my opinion, this is contrary to human belief now, is because I feel like I have to give something up. I feel like I can't have it all. And you just shared an exercise where we can change our own thinking, rewire our own brain, and have something that nobody's wrong. It's just another opinion. Nobody's out to get me. They just have their own path also. Because really, if we all put ourselves first, what do you think that would look like? Can you imagine walking down the street and seeing somebody who has a dour face and you wave or you smile, which by the way, this happens to me occasionally. And because I like to smile at strangers, can only be a moment, but just to know there's connection out there, right? You get this look like, who are you, lady? What are you doing? And whatever the response is, it always cracks me up when I get them. So I just laugh and I'm like, oh, right. Because I used to take it personally, but it's more of an, oh, right. They've got something going on. I witnessed that. Apparently this 1 millisecond of time where we were making eye contact, they needed to be witnessed and seen with that. And I did that. Cool. Off I go to smile at the next stranger. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to think about. We are bringing business into this, but when we talk about me first, we really are talking about this fundamental connection. So if we were to take it back into business, do you say good morning to people when you go into the office? Do you jump on whatever your online communication channels are and say good morning to other people that you're working with and just checking in and keeping that conversation going? Those types of things, it's very interesting to have conversations because everything is always complex. It's so complex. How can I pay my bills and go on vacation now that I've said I'm going to pay my bills and go on vacation? I got another book.
Oh.
I got another book. It's called Simple: Conquering the Crisis of Complexity.
That sounds great.
It's fabulous. It was based off of a TED Talk, actually. This guy, Alan Siegel, he did a TED Talk, and then they made a book out of this. So you can also find it on TED.com. The big idea of the story is when things get too convoluted, it only produces more convolution. You start with a small shake in the ground and all of a sudden you have an avalanche. And so what can you do to identify what is getting complex and in the way, then changing it? And I'm going to give a perfect example. This is every once in a while I have to fly United. So everybody who loves United, I'm sorry, this is not a good United story. And they know it because I've talked to them. In fact, I tweeted them about it. When I fly United, there's always some sort of a problem. And it could be me. I could be the one. And I totally own my part in the fact that I could have this preconceived notion there's going to be a problem. So yes, now there's a problem. But it did come eventually, or from reality of every time I did this, something happened. I fly first class on United always. I will because I have a seat guaranteed to me. My luggage will get there on time. I will have some semblance of civility by the people that are on the plane. And I mean, the list goes on because most airlines have kind of figured out that those things are really important and have already changed them. But my experience, not United. So here I am, I'm going to a baby shower for my niece. I get on the plane and there are 10 first class seats that are broken. They say out of order on them. And this is a full flight. So they are automatically reseating people. Well, I got on the plane in my seat with my ticket and somebody comes up to me and says, "You don't sit here." And I said, "Excuse me, here is my seat. This is what I printed out. I bought this in January. And they said, yeah, you've been reassigned to row 23B. So not only am I in the back of the plane, I'm in the middle seat. And I'm like, oh, really? I said, tell me more about this. Oh, well, all these seats over here are broken and we had to reseat them. And I looked at him and I said, I paid for this seat. I paid for this seat and my seat's not broken. If I was in one of those seats, I'd gladly go sit in 23B because stuff like that happens. But you're reseating me because of this? A lot of people, I was watching it happen to other people. They just said okay and went. And they had sour faces and they were upset and they were grouchy about it. And so I said, no, that's really not going to work for me. Conversation goes on, but the gist was the people who were there did the best they could, which was comp my drinks. And I had two reactions to that. My first one was not so nice. My second one was, this lady is doing the best she can. She's being told or following some process that is outside of her control. So I looked at her and I put my hand on her shoulder and I said, you know what? You're right. It doesn't solve the problem or make me feel better, but I appreciate your gesture and I will take it. So then I get back in my seat with all my stuff and then they move me back to first class to the end. Okay, right? So there was this whole rigmarole, but there were 10 people who had the same experience I did that didn't get to move back. And it comes down to, are we a business that is just trying to nickel and dime everything and or plan so much that there's no freedom for the people to actually do the job their own way? Because I bet if you had had that gate agent and those flight attendants, they would have come up with a different solution in the moment based on the people in that plane to have a better outcome. And so I'm thinking about this in terms of me first, because we have to think about companies too. Sometimes companies get in their own way, going back to simplicity, and they have all these processes and all these ways to do things. All it does is piss off customers.
Oh,
all it does, complexity.
You know who has a wonderful phrase about this, and I've heard her use it? Her name is Jean Bliss, and she wrote the book, I Love You More Than My Dog. It's a customer service book about 5 decisions that you make in your business. And they're very simple decisions. Like one of the chapters is about saying you're sorry. Another one is about trust, like we talked about. But she and I were in a conversation lately, and she kind of let loose. And I don't know, I think I've even have her on video saying this. And she's got this whole thing about, she's like, do you ever stop to think, like, would you do that to your mother?
Right.
If your customer was your mother, if that was your mom on that United flight, would you shuffle her around and make her luggage? Would you do that to your mom? And she just like, it was just a spontaneous thing. But we got on this conversation. And you know, that reminds me of an old sales training trope that we used to have. And it was something like everyone's favorite, how did it go? Everyone's favorite book. It's all about me.
Yes.
So me first isn't just me first as in me first.
Right.
It's also recognizing that that other person, and that was clear in your story, that other person has a me first.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's what they're thinking.
That is what they're thinking. And I have to tell you, thinking, that's it. I have to tell you, just think already. I mean, honestly, and this is where when we have all this confusion and we have all this complexity and we have all this, am I still going to belong if I do it this way? And we don't believe our employees can think for themselves. So we are going to think of everything for them and they're going to have to fit it in. So they're putting round pegs in square holes all day long. None of that is productive for anybody. You know what I mean? If we think about it and we're thinking about, okay, so I know what I need, or I know what I did not get, like sleep or food. So here's how I am. Now I can show up in a conversation and go, all right, me first. I got me. And now I know what my usual strengths and weaknesses are. So now I know, how do I get them? How do I get for you? So for example, you, Ivana, how do I get you? And when we first jumped on this morning, I was like, you know, I had no idea where I was. I'm planning, you're right. I'm planning this big event. It happens tomorrow. And I'm super excited about the fact that it's going to be done and over with. And I laughed for the first time all day today. And I forgot how important laughter is, Ivana. I mean, even on the plane with all the stuff that was going on and all of the grumpiness around me, I just smiled and I was the way that I was. I was actually able to laugh about it. I was able to laugh about the fact all of this stuff had happened because good things had happened. And I had noticed and had some experiences happen to me because I was right here hear and I got to connect with other people who really cared, and we laughed before then. So here we are, we're talking about stuff that could be pretty heady. We talk about stuff that could be very charged, but at the same point in time, we're laughing.
Exactly. Hey, at the end of the day, what else is there to do? And you've mentioned it quite a few times, and it's always something I think about that I have to remind myself of. We create everything that happens to us. And one of my favorite distinctions out there is one that says there's what happens and then there's what you make it mean. So what happened was you didn't get on your seat or whatever, or what happened was they were going to move you around, but you could have made it mean a million things, but you smiled instead, because that's all that happened. You don't get upset about the fact that there's a picture on my wall. So there's a picture on my wall. That's all it is.
Right. And I think you have stated the big idea in a different way. The concept of what do we bring to this and what must occur to create the connection and the open communication that we want. So me first is important, because if we don't know what we want, if we don't know how we are, how can we communicate that to anybody else?
When you're having a party, you're having an event, you don't send people the alphabet. Send an invitation and it says this is the day and this is the thing, and it's almost that same thing. You know who you are and you know what you want. Put it out there, communicate it clearly, and be cognizant that it's not just about you. You have to be clear about who you are, but you have to understand that other people are in their own space too.
Mm-hmm. And this is bold, and I know you'll have an opinion about this. In my opinion, it is bold. It is bold to put ourselves first and understand what that means and how we show up, because if we don't, we're out of practice, or we choose not to practice, which makes it harder on everybody else. And one of the things that Ivana said to me right before I hit record was, warm the chair. And which means practice it, get to know it, figure it out, and how you learn, warm the chair. Right, Ivana?
That's right. That's a real visual there, isn't it?
Cracks me up. I know in our house I use butt in the seat.
Butt in the seat.
That's right. Butt in seat. Now kind of thing. Tell us, what do you think is bold in relationship to what we're talking about and being first, me first?
When you think about me first and foremost, to me, it lands as you're responsible for yourself and you're responsible for your outcomes. The next thing that comes up for me is this idea of integrity. And I don't mean integrity. I think we've talked about this before in some other circumstances. I don't mean integrity in terms of just doing what you say.
Right.
I mean integrity in terms of what works for you and communicating openly. So me first, understanding what works for you. What do you need to be successful? And then having the courage and the integrity to stand for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. You're not doing anyone any favors by hiding behind your insecurity. If you know what works, then be clear about what works. I know that this is what works. If you want to work with me, or if you want to buy from our company, this is the process. This is what works. Mm-hmm. If you, what's the word I'm after? If you don't stand up for that, chances are, and I've had that experience where I know what works and then I try to please the customer and then I don't do what I know works, and guess what happens? It doesn't work. So it's kind of be clear about who you are, take responsibility for who you are, have integrity, and in terms of not just delivering what you say you're going to do, but also understanding what works for you and communicating that clearly. It's like a little bridge, is to understand, to have the empathy to know that that other person counts also. Yes. So it's not just what you make it mean, it's think about what's going on in their head. What is their circumstance like?
And there you have it. We are done for today. Thank you for joining us today as you were listening to this program, Me First, which can be found at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P48. That's P for program 48, or search Me First. Really what we took away was there are a lot of resources out there that tell us a lot of things about what it means to have clarity around what we say and do. And I have to tell you, even with all of those things, Ivana and I could have talked, and we limited it to the time of this program. So what I want from you, and what I ask of you, and what my gift to you is in this moment, is to recognize, what do I want? What do I stand for? How do I put myself first today? And even if it's uncomfortable to recognize, I go to bed at 10 o'clock every night because I want to be able to wake up refreshed in the morning. Whatever it is, it might be, if it feels weird, it's the right thing, because we want to acknowledge and accept that even in the mundane, everyday things, when we put ourselves first, we are able to serve more. When we put ourselves first and we have clarity about what we can do, what we are able to do, what we are choosing as a priority that is important to us, we avoid busy. We avoid the concept of being spread too thin and being overcommitted. And you guys know this. I mean, it's intuitive in all of us. It's really good to hear, though, because when we're talking about being a leader, it's a conversation, it's a dialogue. We're exploring all of these facets of what it means to be a leader today, whether that's the leader of a family, whether that's the leader of a team, whether that's just being the leader myself in my own role, that a leader in an organization that I belong to. It doesn't matter. The leader that we are comes to knowing who we are, what we do, and what we want, and how we can acknowledge what is common, even if it's contrary to our success. So I want to know, what is your reaction to this concept of me first?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Duell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.